So, as we talk about the different elements of the 1930s and the Great Depression, we also need to take a look at the culture and just what was going on at the time in the lives of people related to things other than just the economy and jobs and their homes that they lost. So, when we talk about the culture during this time, it's very difficult. The lives of families and people, they were desperate for any sort of happiness. So they looked for different ways to kind of forget about their troubles, to take a break from everything they're worrying about. So once again, they went to different things related to the entertainment at the time: movies, watching sports, reading books, listening to music. These were all ways for people to have a release from their worries and just get away for a while and focus on some happiness. And so during this time, uh, there was a lot of growth in the movie industry. Watching sports were more easily accessible, and once again, books were published, music was continued to be published and played, and the radio played a huge role in this. So when you think about the radio, it's very different than what it was back then than what it is now. When we turn on the radio, usually for the most part, we're just flipping through channels, listening to music stations. Occasionally, you might go to AM radio. There's more talk radio, there's sports radio. But really, during this time period, think of this as basically a TV where there were different programs. People would act out plays and dramas. There'd be mysteries. There'd be shows where people would whole families come together and gather around the radio and listen to different performances in addition to the music, of course. And so radio became a huge part of the lives of families in a way for them to bond and come together. When you talk about the music, we talked about Louis Armstrong, but in a similar way, a lot of the jazz music that developed continued to change a little bit over time to where you have swing music or big band music. If you've ever seen swing dancing, you can look that up, where it's really upbeat, fast music, and it's still with, brass and pianos and a bass, where you have people listening to this type of music. It became very popular, and Duke Ellington led the way in this music in the 1930s. He was one of the most famous, very talented musicians at the time, because not only did he play piano, he composed and put together a lot of the music. He was a band leader where he and his band traveled around, not just the United States, but Europe. So when we talk about discrimination, there were still places where African Americans could not even enter in these clubs or these different places that they played, yet they would bring in performers. And so, like we talked about before, they might have to enter in the back of the building, and they would not have been let in as paying customers. So there was still a lot of discrimination, but Duke Ellington was able to, with his bands, become really quite famous, and his music you can listen to and look up. But you could see there the saxophones, trumpets. Once again, he played the piano, and there was some singing. But this jazz music evolved into big band, or swing music is what it was called. Another important individual in the 1930s was Margaret Mitchell. She was the author of the book Gone with the Wind. Many people have likely heard of this book, partly too because she has a connection to Atlanta. She was actually lived in Atlanta, and she won the Pulitzer Prize. That is the award for the highest award in literature, the best book that year that was published, and it became extremely popular. But you can actually go and visit Margaret Mitchell's house, like downtown Atlanta, as a little kind of memorial museum type of thing in downtown Atlanta. And so she was well known for this book. And what's interesting, you can see this story here. It was released, and she was worried that the $3 price tag would make it so people could not afford or buy her book. Remember, a lot of people did not have a lot of money at the time, and so this book, it was a large, thick book, a long story, really did sell a lot, and it was able to spread and became a huge book. It also became a movie. They filmed the movie, and in 1939 it came out, and so many of you, if you've heard of Gone with the Wind, probably are more familiar with the movie. What's interesting, 1939, it became one of the great movies ever released. At the same time, 4 months apart, The Wizard of Oz was actually released also. So those two movies at the time went back and forth as two of the best movies ever created, certainly at the time and in the box office, the amount of people who watched it. But the novel itself is about the struggles that this character, Scarlett O'Hara, had during the South during the times of Civil War. So it was not during the time of the Great Depression, but during the Civil War. But people could connect to that. They were experiencing tragedy and difficulties during the 1930s. And so the overall theme of overcoming tragedy and pain and just desperation, that related to a lot of people during this time period, of course. And so here's a scene, Gone with the Wind. It won 10 Academy Awards. And it says if you adjust for inflation, meaning what it was, the cost of what it was at the time of people paying these prices to see the movie, it's still one of the most successful films ever made. Another individual was Jesse Owens at the time. He was an African-American track and field athlete. He, in college, super well known because he began breaking world records even as a young athlete, and he eventually qualified to go to the Olympic Games. In 1936, Germany actually hosted, really right before the World War II really got going, they hosted the Olympics, and so Adolf Hitler was already in charge, and he really spread the message that he thought his athletes in Germany were superior to everybody else, and certainly that any African Americans would not be, nearly as talented. And so what became an issue, Hitler originally at the beginning of the Olympics was seen in the crowd everywhere, but as Jesse Owens began to become more and more looked at as the best athlete at the time, he did not show up for the ceremony of giving the gold medal to Jesse Owens. He actually was in different track and field events, the long jump, sprinting, like different types of races. So he was one of the fastest, greatest athletes at the time, and he won 4 gold medals. And really, what's interesting is it really highlighted the fact that, once again, African Americans were just as skilled, just as talented as anybody else, if not more. And so it broke some of the stereotypes to where people were able to see this and see this on a large stage, because the Olympics were looked at around the world. And so this, once again, Hitler did not like this with the way that he saw his race as superior. He really, as we jump into World War II, we'll see, had some thoughts that were very dangerous. And so this wraps up the 1930s as far as the culture, and we're going to be heading into really what came next, which was World War II.